Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Jeremy Sender. Jeremy is a filmmaker and comedian. He was the creative director of I.O. Comedy Network in Chicago. He has improvised on house teams at UCB and I.O. Chicago. He and Liliana Winkworth make up the sketch duo Todd's Friend Todd. And his freelance clients include Nickelodeon, The Jim Henson Company, BuzzFeed, Cards Against Humanity, A&E, and the National Immigrant Justice Center. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you very much.
So you're here in Boulder, driving to LA.
I am, yeah. I just left Chicago for good. I was there for 3 years, and I lived in LA previously, left with my hands held high, and said never coming back, and 3 years later, I'm going directly back.
So this is a perfect question then. Yeah. So suppose you're headed to LA, but I'm not going to allow you to work as a filmmaker or a comedian.
Sure. So I'm in LA and not able to follow any of my passions.
What do you do? Well, no, maybe you have another passion that's outside of film and comedy.
Fair.
What do you do?
Man, that's a good question. I think this is strange, but I really am fascinated by law, and I don't think I'd want to be a lawyer, but I feel like I would enjoy going to law school and learning about, the Constitution. And so I like the handful of classes I took in college that weren't about film or writing or something like that had a lot to do with, like, I took a civil rights class, I took like a Constitution class, and I forget all of it, but I remember being very fascinated by it.
So I'll give you a tip.
Sure.
If you're going to go to law school, then become a law professor.
Interesting. Okay. I guess those are the only two things you can do with a law degree, isn't it?
Well, like being a professor is hard, but I think it's less hard than being a lawyer. And you can use all your talents.
Yeah.
As a professor.
It's just performing.
I mean,
that's what I feel like
teaching side of things.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like being in a courtroom too. I would love to skip a bunch of steps of being a lawyer and just go into like being a prosecutor and just like making grand statements to a jury. That would be fun. But I think that's just me wanting to be a ham a little bit.
Have you ever been on jury duty?
I haven't. That
may change your mind.
Yeah, maybe. I actually think it's very strange how I've never been called in for jury duty, and I think it's because I change my residence every couple of years, and the people have trouble finding me.
Okay. Yeah. I did a 5-day jury.
Oh, that sounds
couple
intense.
Summers ago.
Yeah.
Boy, I didn't want to do it, and but like most things in life, there were some benefits of it.
Yeah.
You know what the biggest benefit was? It made me realize how happy I am that I don't have a traditional 9-to-5 job.
Sure.
Like, I don't watch the clock.
Yeah.
I haven't watched the clock in, I don't know. It's like since I had a regular 9-to-5 job.
Right.
And
that's why you are always
90s.
late to every class you ever teach.
But no. When I say watch the clock, I mean watch the clock tick down to some point in time.
Yeah,
right. So
that's fascinating
because we'd have a 10 o'clock break.
Mm-hmm.
We would have a noon lunch. We'd have a 1:30 break, a 3 o'clock break.
Yeah.
And then we'd finish. So when lunch started and when the day ended was a little flexible based upon what the judge's whims. But more or less those times were kind of set.
Yeah.
And there were times when I was in that courtroom and I was looking at the clock going, what? I can't believe
1
that
hour,
10 o'clock is taking so long to get here.
Yeah, that sucks.
But it was good also because, just a glimpse into the world and
I feel
and the civic duty. I think that stuff actually matters.
That's nice. I feel like in the past couple of years, especially, I'm certainly in the boat of like, I need to contribute to society and like activism and stuff like that. But so I feel like I might get a rush of the civic duty of it all. And I don't know. I also feel like it might be interesting. It depends. I'm sure 90% of cases for jury duty are super boring. But I feel like it could be interesting to watch lawyers or judges or whoever just espouse just absolute expertise, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I bet you wouldn't find it that. I mean, I actually found the whole overall the experience to be rather provocative, compelling. I think I took like 57 pages of notes.
Dang.
But of course, I'm an overachiever. I suspect.
You're an academic.
Yeah,
no one else took notes at all.
But I think that, and we could submit questions and stuff, which I always did.
Cool.
I was like, I'm going to make you regret picking me for this screen.
Was there any like criteria for questions, or just like whatever was on your mind?
I don't remember.
Because I guess you don't want to make a long
yeah, I don't. They gave us some standards, but I don't.
Okay.
I don't remember what they were. I mean, I wrote some pretty banging questions. I have to say.
I'm sure.
I would say that from what I know of you, you're a thoughtful guy.
Yeah, I think I'm more left brain than right brain.
Yeah, you're like you're a what we call System 2 kind of guy.
What does that mean?
Well, actually not. Actually, it's interesting because as an improviser, you end up being both of those things. So I'll do a very quick thing. So
sure.
Essentially, there's sort of two modes of thought.
Yeah. If you're listening, Pete is standing up and performing.
I just put on a professor hat.
Yeah.
So essentially they're along some continuum, but System 1 is kind of fast, it's hot, it's emotional, it's intuitive,
Sure.
it's your gut.
Yeah, that's not me at all.
So when you represent System 1 in a talk, I use Homer Simpson.
Okay.
Homer Simpson is System 1.
Yeah.
System 2 is more controlled, it's colder, it's more calculated, it's more brain.
Yeah.
And that's like Spock. So it's
Sure.
Homer and Spock kind of thing.
Love their scenes together.
Look, that's the making
Yeah.
that's the making of a good comedy,
Yeah.
right?
The Odd Couple.
Crazy Straight,
Yeah.
you just put them together.
That's it.
So the idea essentially is like, you need to be somewhat Homer to be a good improviser because you have to be in the moment and you have to be quick.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you have to be like Spock, especially I think long form, because you have to be thinking and planning and listening and putting things, integrating.
Right.
And what I'm saying is you sitting on a jury, you seem like a little bit of a System 2 kind of guy.
I think I would be.
You would be sitting there, you're analyzing this stuff, you're thinking it through, you're doing extra work.
Right.
Because you like to think. Homer doesn't like to think. Spock likes to think.
That's right.
So
that's interesting. Yeah, that's kind of you have done some like UCBLA stuff.
I have.
Yeah. At least a year ago, when we met, you were talking about you were in level like 201.
I think I had just finished 201.
Okay. Have you done more since then?
No, not yet, but I'm doing a sabbatical in LA next year.
Oh, cool.
And my plan is to do 301, 401, a sketch class.
Nice.
And what else? What else should I do?
Oh, interesting. I never have taken the sketch writing classes there, but only because I did all the improv classes through and then did advanced. And so I felt like I kind of understood what they were going to teach me, which is very short-sighted. But I think they have sketch classes at the Pack Theater now, which are taught by a lot of the like Whitest Kids You Know guys.
Did you say Whitest?
Yeah. Have you heard of them?
No.
No, they're a pretty they had a TV show. They're a pretty popular sketch group called Whitest Kids You Know.
Oh, okay. I thought you were making a joke.
Oh, no. I never would.
Because,
Dead
UCB
serious.
is filled with some of the whitest kids you know.
Fair
Hence
enough.
That's probably the name of it.
Yeah, I think that show was from I think it was in the 90s. So I think it was before calling their group that would have been just a nail in the coffin. Yeah.
I take that back, actually.
Yeah.
My 101 and 201 classes were surprisingly diverse.
I think they're a huge tangent now, but I think they're making a really, really great effort to diversify because when I I left 3 years ago, and I was on a mess hall team, which is one of the starter Herald teams.
Okay.
And all the Herald teams and most of the mess hall teams at that point were like, they were starting to make the effort at that point, but mostly white, like hopefully half and half men and women, but usually mostly men. But it was moving in the right direction. And now I recently looked at the website just to see like what the teams look like since I'm going back out. And it's like night and day. It's crazy. I think I realized how much more diverse it looked, and I like counted the amount of like white dudes per team, and it's usually like much less than half. So I think they're making a really concerted effort that seems to be going well.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons I think that's leading in that direction. Now, I did the intensives, so this were 2 weeks, 4 days a week. So I don't know if there's something about those intensives that lead to a different group of people.
Yeah, people who have like 2 weeks free and can spend like $400. I think you get a certain type of privilege in there for sure.
But, clearly in that class, this obviously, I don't know how well your skill in 101, 201 predicts your skill in 401 advanced and in a house. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, well, no, let me just say this. I know that if you're awful in 101, it's going to be very difficult to...
You have a bigger mountain to climb.
Yeah, but if you get a B, which I got, in 101 and 201, I think like almost everyone gets Bs, I'm guessing.
I'm pretty sure.
But we had some truly standout people. They were in theater. They were actors.
Right.
These are people pursuing their profession. They weren't straight white dudes.
Right.
In my class. I was like in one of the class I was the oldest person.
Okay.
The other one I was the second oldest person.
That's interesting.
It's a daytime class though. Remember, it's a daytime class.
Right.
Maybe I was the second oldest in both classes. In any case.
The reason I brought it up because I was going to
please.
say your... What was it? Type A, Type B? What was it?
System 1, System 2.
Yes. Clearly, I'm a great listener. System 1, System 2 sounds a lot like what Billy Merritt talks about, which is like you're a pirate, improviser, a robot, or a ninja. So he has like those 3 types.
Okay.
So pirate, like the Homer Simpson, very System 1, totally feeling and just they're just instinctual. And then robot is the Spock, and they're thinky, and they're on the back line, and they're coming up with moves for like 2 scenes from now and the like. And then ninja, I suppose, is kind of not the in-between, but it is the type of player who can be like on the back line watching a scene, recognizing what's wrong, coming in, saying one thing, leaving, and fixing the entire thing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So if you want to read about this, I'll put this stuff in the exhibits when this gets launched. But so my postdoc advisor, Danny Kahneman, won the Nobel Prize in economics for psychological insights into economics. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. Thinking, fast and slow. And so fast System 1, slow System 2.
Right.
So what is this guy's name who said about pirate, robot, ninja?
Billy Merritt.
So Billy Merritt's book would be, improvising
right.
as a pirate, robot, or maybe a ninja,
right.
Something like that. I see.
Right.
That's great. Okay, so we got way off track on a bunch of things, which is fine.
Yeah.
So you're moving to LA, back to LA.
Back to LA.
And tell me why.
Yeah, I mean, I did 3 years in Chicago, and I loved it, and for a lot of reasons. And
you went there for a job.
My girlfriend went there for a job,
okay.
And we were both living in LA previously, and I think we were both pretty frustrated with our lot there. We had moved there. We did like our last semester of college there. We did an internship, and then we stayed, and so we were just like very young in LA with absolutely zero like professional experience, and so it's just hard.
It helps, I love LA.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time there. You know what really makes LA better?
What?
Having money.
Sure does, right? Good Lord. We were living in Valley Village in like one room in like a 3-bedroom apartment that we subletted, and it was just the worst. Like the only thing around us was like a 7-Eleven, and it was hot, and it was just the valley. And then we've visited a handful of times since then, and we were like staying in like Pasadena and going around to like Echo Park and like hanging out in the hills, and just being, oh man, when you are rich here, this is great.
It really is a city. I mean, I think New York has that some.
Well, you can't even be there unless you're rich.
Yeah, but it really, So, in any case, I hope you made boatloads of cash in Chicago.
We won the lottery, and we're going back. No, I mean, we both. I don't know if this is because we were in Chicago or just because we're like have more distance between us and college, but we have kind of both figured out our paths a little bit clearer, and I certainly got a lot of good experience in Chicago. I think most of the freelance work that you read there was from me being out there, which is so strange because they're all like companies based in New York and LA, but I was in Chicago working for lots of them because I think, I don't know, Chicago's a great town to take a lot of risks and make a lot of mistakes with very low stakes. And then also when people come to town from the New York or LA or whatever bigger industry towns, they kind of romanticize Chicago and think like, ooh, this guy's writing this web series from Chicago. We have to bring him out to LA, which is like stupid because I could write the exact same bad web series in LA
or in Kansas.
Exactly.
But no one's going to see you in Kansas.
Right. That's it. So Chicago is a great middle ground where people will see you, and if you're making crap, it might be a little romanticized, and even if it's not romanticized, the palette refreshes, I think, a little more often.
I see.
Yeah.
So for the Humor Code launch, the Humor Research Lab, my co-author Joel Warner and I created the list of the funniest cities in America.
Okay.
So we actually had an algorithm called the Humor Algorithm, that calculated and ranked the funniest cities in America.
Yeah.
Chicago was number 1.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
I think that's, I don't know, when did you do that?
2014.
Okay, so it's pretty recently. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I mean, my experience in LA, when I went there first, I think the improv I see there, no disrespect to Chicago, but I think the improv I saw in LA is on the whole better than the improv you see in Chicago, but because it's people from like Chicago, New York, and blah, blah, blah cities who got good and then are in LA. So it's like the graduate school of improv kind of. But Chicago is like, they have plenty of industry, but that is a huge industry of the city. It's just people come out here from anywhere and to do just comedy specifically. Mm-hmm. And that reads through for sure.
Well, what I liked about Chicago being number 1. So LA and New York was 6 and 7 or 7 and 6.
Right.
They were, I can't remember which one was which. What I like about that is oftentimes when people find out we did this funniest cities list, I say, what do you think's the funniest city in America? And the modal response, the most common response is Chicago.
Wow.
So I like that it came out first, and that when people guess, they guess Chicago.
It's great confirmation bias.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah.
Wait, so I want to stop. We'll get to what you're going to be doing in Los Angeles. Sure. and this idea, which I'm eager to hear about. So you were creative director for IO Comedy Network in Chicago, and you did that this past few years? I
did it for a little over a year.
And then you did freelance work.
Yes.
So tell me about what were those jobs like?
Sure. So the IO Comedy Network is like the video arm of the IO Theater. So the IO Theater is like the theater that Del Close and Charno Halpern opened. It's kind of the birthplace of long-form improv.
Okay.
Del Close was do you know the story of it at all?
Well, so I know some of it, but I actually have listeners now.
Cool.
So
hello.
no pressure.
Yeah.
This is great because I've talked to improvisers before.
Sure.
Not many, but I have. Can you pretend I don't know anything about the history of improv?
Sure.
Can you give me a quick rundown?
Yeah, I'll give you an abridged version. So the Second City is kind of the birthplace of like sketch comedy theater that uses improv.
Hold on, you have to stop for me because
Sure.
I'm going to pretend I don't know anything.
Great.
What's the difference between sketch comedy and improv?
Sure. So sketch comedy is just pre-written comedy scenes, and improv is short for improvisation. So no pre-planning, no writing. You might have like kind of rules to a game that you're going to play or something like that, but the specifics are totally made spontaneously on the spot.
So Saturday Night Live is sketch comedy.
Yes, exactly. Saturday Night Live is sketch comedy.
Whose line is it anyways? Is improv
comedy.
Okay.
Correct. Right, where they know what kind of game they're playing, but what the specifics are totally made up. Right, exactly. So the Second City.
I'm really good as someone who doesn't know anything about this.
Honestly, you have a lot. You have a lot of data for this. Anyway, yeah. So the Second City Theater in Chicago was kind of the birthplace of popularized sketch comedy, and they used improv comedy as a tool to like rehearse and come up with ideas for sketches and write sketches out. And so the main show at Second City, they have something called Process, which is 2 months or so, a handful of weeks, where they improvise in front of audiences, and then they're writing independently a lot as well, and they use those ideas to hone in like a review, like a sketch show. And so that was just kind of the mode of comedy, or that type of comedy, for a long time. And improv was just seen as like this rehearsal tool, this tool for coming up with ideas. And Del Close was a guy from, I don't know if he's from San Francisco. I know that a lot of the Second City folks came from doing this type of thing in San Francisco and brought it to Chicago. I'm underinformed. Some people will probably be mad at me for this. But anyway, Del Close was a director at the Second City. So he was helping comedians improvise and come up with sketch ideas. And at a certain point, he was like, the improv is getting really good. And I think we are hitting a tipping point where we can turn the improv into the show. Like, it's an art form that can stand alone. And he hit a lot of naysayers. I think a lot of people really vehemently disagreed with him. And he was famously this like cantankerous, just grump. And he did a lot of drugs, and he considered himself a witch. He was like a weird dude.
Sounds like the perfect kind of person to innovate.
Yes, exactly. Like he died pretty young, I think, because he was just doing a ton of drugs all the time. But yeah, he just refused to live by anybody else's standards, for sure. And so
Can I interrupt
Yeah.
for a second? You know what I think's so interesting about this?
Yeah.
Is the reason the average person gets into comedy is because they don't play well with others in the traditional sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a classroom is a little too confining and too rules oriented.
Right.
That 9 to 5.
Right.
You know, the rat race and so on. The other one is they're sort of impish. They don't like being told what to do. Like a sort of. So it's
Sure.
not only just the lifestyle. They like to keep their own hours and do whatever, but they also just don't like to be told how they need to behave.
That's interesting.
And which helps to make good comedy.
Sure.
You know, like it clearly, because comedy plays on misbehavior.
Right.
At the very least, it plays on seeing the world in a different way.
Yes.
And yet, here you are in this world of comedy, filled with these imps, right? Filled with these people who
Do it this way.
They like to do it their own way.
Right.
And then here comes this guy who's going, you know, I really think this improv thing has legs,
Right.
and we could just do improv shows.
Right.
And then, so there's something called the status quo bias,
Sure.
which is just that we tend to think whatever is in place is the right thing.
Right.
And the deviations from it, while they may be beneficial, people tend to focus on the
That's really
costs.
interesting. Yeah.
And so even this group of people
Yeah.
go, no, the sketch thing, that's where it's at.
And it, like, all things considered, the Second City, I think, started in like the late 50s, early 60s. So like, and this was happening in like the late 70s, early 80s. So it'd been around for a while, but all things considered, it's still pretty new. And these are all the founders. Like, it's not like it had been passed down from generations or anything. And you're right. All of a sudden, they're just like, no, we deviated and now we're right. Yeah.
And does that explain, and I'm sure you're going to get to this,
Sure.
does that explain a little bit about why there's these different brands
Of like improv
of
comedy?
improv?
I think so, but I think it's a little more nuanced. than
Okay.
that. Yeah. So yeah, I'll continue the story. So right, Del Close thinks, oh, improv can be the thing. And he teams up with Charna Halpern, who still runs the IO Theater. And they, I think, if I am remembering the like the back of the book Truth and Comedy.
I think I have it in here
Yeah.
somewhere.
I think the Improv Olympic Theater already existed. I don't think they founded it, but they essentially took it over. It's a good book. If you take a class at the IO Theater in Chicago, you'll get one for free. So don't buy one.
I'm looking on my shelf as you talk right now. You keep talking. Hold
Great. Yeah. So they kind of take over the Improv Olympic Theater and they create this improv form called the Herald. And as opposed to a type of improv game you might see on Whose Line Is It Anyway, where it's like, this person has a secret and it's blank, and then they play out like a 2-minute scene, the Herald is this long form where you get a single suggestion and then the cast improvises for like 20 to 30 minutes, and it's like the whole show. And so that went through a whole bunch of different iterations, and slowly they started teaching classes, and by the late 80s, it was a pretty sustainable art form. And then you had this, in the 90s and early 2000s, it's just every person that you see on TV or SNL or whatever, or many of the people you see just got their start from like long form improv.
Yeah. I think there are a couple things that I'm going to stop pretending like I don't know. I know like there was this very clear switch in television away from
Yes.
stand-up comics
Yeah.
to improvisers. It all makes sense. Stand-up comics are good joke writers. They're so performers,
Right.
but improvisers are more naturally actors.
Sure.
And then you can also bring that skill to a taping where they can try things. You can use improv.
Yes.
I mean, and I think Judd Apatow does this on a regular basis with his films, where he has the actors do the line that's written on the script, and then do 30 more improvisational takes.
Yeah. I think they cut a second version of Anchorman based off of the takes they didn't use, and it's like a different movie.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is interesting about improv, but that I don't think the average person gets, is the notion of rules.
Yeah.
That there's a set of rules associated, especially with the Herald.
Yes.
And the way I like to think about it is, and talk about it, because I think a lot of people know sports really well,
Sure.
is that in some ways it's like a sport, except that there's no competition.
Sure.
And so the idea is
Collaborative game type
it's
of
a
thing.
collaborative
Yeah.
game, right? So there are rules associated with basketball,
Yes.
and when the game starts and when the game ends and what happens, and and so on.
Have you heard, to reference another podcast, I'm sorry, but Keegan-Michael Key talks about that, and he relates it to basketball.
Oh, he
as
does.
well. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know, but
Sorry I know it was a super original thought, and you did really well with it. But someone more successful has already tread this territory. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you're saying, right? Like,
thanks for. Now I just lost some listeners.
I'm really sorry.
They're pulling up.
I'm not telling you what the podcast is, so good luck finding it. But yeah, he said that Dr. Naismith would
yes,
basketball.
yes.
Yeah, he drew out the rules, like these lines are out of bounds. The hoop is this high. You can dribble this many times or take this many steps. But within those rules, you can do whatever you want. So that's how you get Michael Jordan or LeBron James, who are like innovators in the game and who like are, I don't really pay attention to the NBA, but I know that they're very good. But that's how you get like that's why watching basketball is not really boring to people, because you have this set of guidelines, but then it's pushing those boundaries.
And there's uncertainty.
Yeah, and there's uncertainty.
Lots of uncertainty.
Totally.
Yeah. And some games are good and some games are less good.
Sure.
Okay, so Where did we leave off? Okay, so the Harold, so they teach the Harold, and then this starts being, and so when you go to the average improv show,
Sure.
you're seeing some version of the Harold, unless it's Jane Saltzman, who was here recently. And this is short form, which is more of these like more
This is like game based.
very game short,
Yes.
few minute kind of things that are very jokey.
Right, where it's like the premise of what's about to happen is like explicitly laid out to the audience, and then they do that game. So, right, like in Whose Line, it's they're newscasters, and this newscaster is
Scenes from a Hat.
Exactly, scenes from a
Yes.
hat. Yeah, exactly. And there's still a handful of like Comedy Sports is a big theater that still does that. I think that's very accessible improv comedy.
I love it. I'll admit
do
it.
you?
I love it. It's so funny.
I mean, I think it would be disingenuous for people to pretend like they full hate it. A lot of long form improvisers are like, ugh, poof. Like short, I don't really feel the need to do it, but I
Short form's like
it.
going to a dunk contest.
Yeah, yeah.
It's great. Like, who doesn't like a good dunk contest?
They just put a trampoline under the hood, and they got an 8 foot tall dude He's doing a bunch of flips. Yeah, man.
Who doesn't like a good dunk
Yeah.
contest? Look, I understand the artist
Sure.
wants the Harold.
Yes, for
I get
sure.
it.
It's
I
much
get
more
it.
fulfilling that way, I think.
Oh, and we don't have time to go into this, but the thing about the Harold is it's incredibly complicated,
Mm-hmm.
and when it's done well, it seems there's like this beautiful erupting experience where things are getting pulled out of the air and so on. If you know the Harold or you know the beats of the Harold, there's a structure on it
Yeah.
that on one hand I think like makes it seem less magical,
Sure.
but on the other hand it actually makes it seem more magical
Because it's hard.
it's really hard. So
Yeah.
the short way to talk, I mean, you could probably explain the Harold better, but the idea essentially is there's these beats, and what happens is as you go on in the show, you have to revisit topics in new ways,
Yes.
and then at the very end, you have to integrate all the topics
Yes.
that have been covered, and that is an incredibly difficult skill.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it's you're like hitting your head and rubbing your belly all at the same time. It's from column A and column B all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's super difficult.
You know, the closest thing that I get to that,
Mm-hmm.
besides when I try to do, I mean, I'm only doing like the baby steps at this point.
Mhm.
Like, I've never
Of
done a
improv.
full Harold, obviously.
Right.
Is this podcast?
Mm-hmm.
So this podcast is an improvisational experience.
Sure.
You know, I have some rules,
Yeah.
I have some guidelines, but like right now, I'm already thinking, well, we have to get back to what you do as a creative director.
Right.
We have to get back to what you were doing with BuzzFeed and A&E.
Sure.
We still have to get back to why the hell you're going back to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You know, and so in the
Still
back
in the
of my
intro. Yeah.
right, and so in the back of my mind,
Yeah.
I'm still, you know, we're just
Yeah.
having a conversation. It's an amazing skill that I'm still working on.
You're doing pretty well.
Thank you so much. But it's a different one than when I'm on the other side of the mic, when I'm getting asked questions.
Right. Right. Because you don't super have to worry about it when you're not driving the ship.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'm not saying that this podcast is as hard as a Harold, but
I'm sweating.
it has some of those same elements.
Sure.
Okay, so how do we get IO? How do we get UCB? How do we get Second
Right.
City? How do we get Comedy Sports? Those are the major brands?
I think so. There are a handful of others. There's like the Groundlings and stuff like that.
Groundlings,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So
But people only know Groundlings because of Will Ferrell.
kind of. I mean, yeah. Let's leave it at that. I mean, I'm not. I haven't ever been super involved with it, but like a lot of like Kristen Wiig and Will Forte and a bunch of people came.
Oh,
from there.
okay.
So,
So
yeah.
I take it back.
Yeah.
But only because of Kirsten Wiig.
Only Kristen Wiig. Oh, but Will Ferrell. Never mind. So there's the Second City, and then the Improv Olympic Theater kind of branches off from that. Sorry, at the table. And I should clarify. It's called the Improv Olympic Theater, and then at a certain point, the actual Olympics, the Olympic Committee, realized that the Improv Olympic Theater was a thing and sued them.
Seriously.
Yeah.
They sent him a cease and desist.
Yeah, yeah. I think it might have actually become a real lawsuit. I don't. I don't know if it was as simple as a cease. For some reason, this committee of athletes thought that people were going to go to Chicago.
It's administrators. It's not the athletes. I know it.
Oh, of course. But even these people who administrate athleticism think that people are going to go to Chicago and see a comedy show and be like, the Olympics were really terrible this year. They really thought that. So the theater changed their name to IO as the initials. So it's the IO Theater now. So yeah, IO gets...
I'm sure there were a lot of sketches written about that at the time.
At the time. I wasn't there, but I'm sure, yes. So yeah, IO starts getting really popular. You know, like Chris Farley comes out of there, Mike Myers, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, a whole host of like famous comedians. And a group that is there is the Upright Citizens Brigade. So they're a...
Like they were a house team called Upright Citizens Brigade?
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. I don't know. They weren't like I don't think they were like a Herald team at the theater, but they were performing sketch and improv at the theater, and they were like teachers there and regular performers there, and that was like their independent thing. And so that included Amy Poehler and Matt Besser and Matt Walsh and Ian Roberts, and when they were in Chicago, a bunch of other people as well. I think Horatio Sands and like Neil Flynn and a bunch of like really well-known comedians now. But those first four I mentioned, at a certain point, decide like, okay, we've been in Chicago doing this for a long time, and we're hitting momentum that we can capitalize on. And so they moved to New York, and they had a show on Comedy Central called the Upright Citizens Brigade. That was a sketch show. And while they're out there, they start teaching improv, because long form improv doesn't really exist in New York at this point. This is like the late 90s. And so they start teaching classes, and it kind of blows that scene up. You know, they're the most popular comedy game in town, and they open a theater, and they open a second theater in New York, and then they open a theater in LA, and now a second theater in LA. So it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And
not surprisingly, in hindsight.
Sure.
Right. I mean, doing improv is fun. Yeah, they're right. Yeah, they're the best. Improv is fun. Mm-hmm. It's an important skill to have if you want to be in entertainment. Hell, it's an important skill to have in life.
Yeah.
And then you move it to the two biggest cities in the United States, which also happen to be the two primary hubs of entertainment.
Yeah, it begs the question of like, why was IO just in Chicago for all this time?
Or, you know, like again, you know, you talk about the status quo bias.
Yeah.
Why didn't Second City? You know, some of it is you need to have a business mind, and artists don't always have business minds. But why?
Yeah.
Why?
And Second City historically has been in a bunch of other cities.
Okay.
There is a Second City in Hollywood. I don't know when they opened, but it's a small operation.
I see.
But they still exist in Toronto. They had one in Detroit that was popular. They had one in Vegas that was popular. I think right now it's Hollywood, Chicago, and Toronto.
I see.
But they've been all over. And I also had a theater in LA that very recently closed, kind of unceremoniously.
I see.
We don't need to get into it.
So I'm afraid we're gonna get a little too inside baseball here, but I do want to ask you one question.
Yeah.
So in your bio you sent me, you say that you use the benign violation theory in sketch writing classes. You taught it at IO Chicago.
Yes.
You said you love.
I love it.
You love it.
And I do use it. Yeah.
And you use it, which I think this is not why you're on. You would be on even if you didn't. But there's like some subtle differences between these brands of improv.
Yes.
And so correct me if I'm wrong, UCB is much more about pursuing laughs.
Yes.
Than IO.
Yes.
And you like laughs.
Sure do.
Hence why you... So tell me how you're using the benign violation theory.
Sure. That's a good point. I actually just wrote the first draft of an essay that maybe will be published in a not real publication, but like a Chicago improv journal about the difference between like improv comedy and improv theater. And yeah, Chicago's all about improv theater. I think because that's where improv started. I think it kind of has that groundwork to it. they have like like piano accompanying, and they have like table service. It feels more like a night at theater. And at like UCB, you like are cramped around the stage.
Yeah, it's $5.
$5, right? Exactly, and it feels more like comedy. And in style too, it's kind of the way I think about it is that improv theater kind of really invests a lot in that benign and that like base reality of the theater, of the relationship, the themes, the stakes, the drama of it all. And then once that's really set in stone and like 3-dimensional, then you can pepper in little comedic bits, and those hit harder because you've created this like deep 3-dimensional world. And then UCB is kind of the inverse, where certainly you have to like lay up groundwork and a base reality in order to figure out what your jokes are going to be about. But it's really geared towards finding that singular comedic premise.
The unusual thing.
Yes. And then justifying that and making a pattern out of that, and taking that singular comedic idea and milking as much as you can out of
That's true,
it.
yeah.
It's like very economical scenes. Yeah, for sure. And you're right. So I always kind of, it's the same concept, but approached in a more theatrical way, where even if a scene, you very well may be able to watch a scene that wasn't very funny, there may be a couple moments of levity, but it's like really good theater.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, most things we watch on TV or in film aren't comedic, and yet they're really compelling and entertaining and emotional. Yeah, I think the good evidence for this is, in UCB, if you take 101, it's basically giving you all the basics, how to create a scene.
Right.
And 201 teaches you what they call game.
Right.
Which is finding the unusual thing that can be justified. Right. That, and what was funny is when I took 201, I finally figured out why improv was funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of the things that I was like, this doesn't lend itself to the benign violation theory as nicely as other forms of comedy do.
Interesting. I think it does much more.
Well, and but you probably do because you live in the world of improv. But as someone who watches,
let's fight, Pete.
who watches improv, it's not obvious.
Yeah,
I had to start doing it to figure it out. And so that, so to me, and maybe I want to hear how you talk about this, but
sure.
My vernacular is, the thing that's funny is this unusual thing that has some justification.
Yes.
So that, so this thing that is a violation is benign. This behavior that's wrong is actually okay from this other perspective.
Yeah.
And so they don't use my language in it, but that's what's, I think, happening.
They don't use the language, but it's like they're synonyms totally, right? Like justifying an unusual thing is making a violation benign.
Yes,
entirely.
true.
Yeah, almost precisely. So yeah, the way I talk about it in my class is I will have students come in with like a general premise for a sketch they want to write, and so we talk about what they like about it, what they think is funny about it. And a lot of times that takes a fair amount of digging, but eventually what you get to is an idea that is unusual based in a context. So there's like a contrast of the thing that they like versus the setting that it's in. And so I will write those two down on like a whiteboard, the benign, the setting, what's the word I'm looking for? Just the base reality, and the violation, the unusual thing. Yeah. And we'll talk about what about that unusual thing they like, and we'll use that to just create a bunch more like steps in that pattern. And then likewise, we'll go to that benign element and create a lot more steps in that pattern. And that can look like, I think there was a scene about a boy bringing a girl home boy bringing a girlfriend home to meet his parents, and the joke was that the parents say make yourself at home, and she like way overdoes it, and she just like starts raiding the fridge and like
baking cookies
and just like burping and like stuff like that. I mean, not an amazing premise, but like there's comedy for sure. And so, sorry, go ahead.
I want to interrupt because I'm thinking, the place to look for these are Saturday Night Live skits.
Yes.
Especially some of the classics ones, like,
Yeah.
Bill Murray, lounge singer.
Sure.
But a weirdo.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or,
That's exactly, and that's the simplest version of it, where it's
yes.
like lounge singer. We have all these ideas of what a lounge singer does, and then he just does weird thing, like the weird version of it.
yes. Or the one that I was, I went down like the YouTube rabbit hole at one point, but it was, is, you know, they've done 2 of these with the alien abduction.
Mm-hmm.
With Ryan Gosling as the guest host.
Yes, because he laughs
Yes.
all the way through it. Yeah.
But what is her name? Kate McKinnon is in it, right? So it's interesting because the base reality doesn't have to be normal. It just has to be normal within that reality.
Right.
So these 3 people, they've all been abducted by aliens.
Right.
By the way, if you have not, this is to the audience, if you have not seen this sketch, do yourself a favor and watch both of the sketches because
they're super. It's
gold.
Yeah.
It is absolute.
It's like
gold.
a masterclass in specifics.
It's amazing.
It's so good.
So 2 of the abductees have these magical, wonderful experiences, and the third, Kate McKinnon, basically gets molested.
Pretty much, yeah. Just terrible.
But what's interesting about it is she's not really upset about it.
Right.
Right.
That's
How do you
important.
make the violation benign?
Right.
Is that she's sort of just like, you know, she has a line in there. She goes, well, I'll tell you, it wasn't my worst Saturday night.
Yeah. Right. Because she's okay with it.
She's okay
Right.
with it.
And that's kind of how I like to look at scenes. And I think I'm getting better at like improvising and using this tool like in my brain in like the present a little bit better. Is I kind of like to look at it as like a bubble leveler type of thing where like you lean too far to one side, it's too violating, too far to the other side is too benign. So you kind of like balance in between. And so that scene, you're right. The context, the base reality is that these people were abducted by aliens, and these people had like magical, surreal experiences, which
bathed in this glow of light, and it felt
exactly right. They got healed, stuff like right, which in the world is super violating because it's not real, but we've seen like sci-fi stuff and it's presented as the context. So that is we've zeroed the scale there. And then when Kate McKinnon is talking about how she was like probed and molested, that's a violation based against that context, but it's also like gross and sad. So I would argue that like, okay, then the bubble leveler is leaning too far to the left and it's getting too violating. So we need to like hit that benign more. So what makes it more even is her being both molested in a terrible situation, but also being like, you know what, not so bad.
Nonplussed by it. Yes,
exactly.
That's right. Yeah, it's really fascinating. Now, what I think is interesting is, I mean, I would love to speak to her about this.
Yeah,
is, so you're approaching it from like taking this theory and then moving it down into practice. I think I just get the sense that a lot of comedians just have really good instincts.
I think so.
They just sort of, in the same way that you don't need to know physics to hit a baseball over the fence. But the better you understand the movement of the ball, then the better you can hit a, so it can help, but it's by no means sufficient or necessary.
Yeah, I think everybody needs a different like skill set, or everyone has a different skill set and like needs different information. Right. There are probably baseball players who just have the muscle memory, and if they thought about it, would instantly suck at it. And then there are people who know like, oh, if I hit a ball that's like a little more outside, I'll get more leverage and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Like Ted Williams, like famously wrote a book about hitting a baseball. And essentially there were like 100 places in the strike zone that he illustrates in the book.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like you. You're like the Ted Williams of improv, because you're like,
I like to think so.
And sketch. I mean, I guess you find it more useful for sketch because you can be more system too.
Yes, because I think when people think about sketch, they expect to see like really polished stuff. So you can think about it in improv, but it's most helpful when you can sit down with an idea that you might be able to improvise, but then think about the theory behind it and punch it up to 11.
Yeah, I'm excited to take a sketch class.
Yeah.
Because I think that probably works a little better for me.
Yeah.
In terms of my like the skills I already have.
You've written books and papers. You can write a 2-page sketch.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the thing.
Yeah.
And also it allows me to be slow.
Yes.
Allows me to be slow. Okay. Creative director, IO. So what are you doing at IO Chicago as
So I just
director?
left, but for over a year, I was overseeing the video side of IO. So the Comedy Network existed before I took over, but
do they actually have a channel? Where do you?
They do. They have a YouTube and a Facebook channel. The Facebook channel is much more popular. So if you search on Facebook for the IO Comedy Network, you'll find a bunch of videos. So when I took over, I implemented network teams, which kind of mirror Herald teams at the theater. So these are video sketch teams, and they're made of like writers and actors and directors, and they work together to make video sketches. And so I was overseeing that, giving script notes, helping out with production and post and release. And that was the bulk of it.
That's
And
like a producer. You sound like a producer.
I was essentially like the executive producer of IO's sketch videos. Yeah. In the short of it, that's what I was doing for sure. So yeah, I kind of designed that structure for it. Yeah.
All right. And then you on the side, or you were doing some freelance work. You were
Yes.
making, and were you making comedy for these?
So for some, yeah, I worked with like BuzzFeed and Cards Against Humanity. A lot of it was like, for BuzzFeed, we did like branded content stuff. So it was like the BuzzFeed listicle video, but then at the end it was like brought to you by Jewel-Osco, like, which is the big grocery store out in Chicago.
I see.
Right. So that's a little more
Do you like
structured.
that work? Do you like doing that?
I
kind of
do
work?
like it. I think BuzzFeed specifically, I love BuzzFeed, but I specifically, they have like a very specific style and voice. So for that, it's much less getting my ideas in and like fitting into that.
Yeah, you
mold.
get a creative brief. I assume you get a creative brief of some sort. No.
Yes, for sure. So I was like brought on as a producer for it because they were shooting this in Chicago. And so they pretty much had the script written, but I had a lot of like arguably creative duties, but I wasn't going to like really change the like content really. But with other clients, I mean, a lot of people will, like, for instance, it was a small client, but there's a gym in Chicago that we kind of made a digital commercial for, and they wanted to do essentially a sketch, and they wrote this idea out, and we had to keep it to their idea for sure, but we could pitch jokes and shoot it in the style that we wanted to. So I think there's a lot of overlap for sure. Yeah.
But real quick, back to the teaching thing. So you teach sketch. Taught sketch
at IO while I was there. Yeah. Yeah. And that was there was like video sketch. So part of it was also like learning screenwriting format and stuff like that.
And yeah, okay. My sense is that a lot of these sort of improv sketch brands, it's a way to get people paid.
Sure.
So like you have these people on these house teams they're very good,
Yeah.
but they don't really get paid that much for performing, but
they don't get paid anything. Yeah.
they teach classes and they make a little bit of money at least.
Yes. Yeah. And I think also from the student's perspective too, it's that opportunity to translate that nebulous stuff they do on stage and have a physical product and show it to people and potentially leverage that into like acting and writing. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you get stuck doing improv on stage and the only people who see it are the 20 or so people in the room, and most of those people are not going to help you out.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled that you found some use in the theory.
Yeah. It's been great.
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people. I mean, essentially it's very similar to UCB theory, just using different terms, but essentially everybody who has taken the class that I taught gave me feedback of like, oh, I didn't understand why things worked and now I do.
I'll tell a quick anecdote.
Yeah.
So when I took 201,
Mm-hmm.
So when I take these improv classes, I don't tell people that I study comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it'd be distracting.
Yeah, you'd be a huge dick.
So I just say, oh, I'm a professor. I just say I'm a professor.
Yeah.
And it's in LA, so no one really, all they care about is themselves. So they never,
You're kind of the unicorn who's not an actor or a writer.
They don't ever ask any other questions, so
Right.
it's safe.
Right.
So the first day of 201, this guy comes in. He didn't end up becoming our instructor. Mm-hmm. And he says, as an aside, I think it's probably useful for me to explain what makes things funny.
Uh-oh.
And so I'm just sitting there going, oh, this ought to be good. And so he does this whole spiel about what makes things funny. And I'm going, nope, that's not it. And
You got up and you put on your professor hat.
I didn't,
Yeah.
I mean, I just didn't have, I was not interested in going, well, actually.
Sure.
And
A straight white man? You didn't want to say, well, actually.
I
in the
did
class?
not.
Got it.
He was a straight white man too,
Fair
so it would have been perfect. We cancel each other out. So, but I almost was like, sent him my book, and then I was just like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just not gonna worry about it. All right. So you are in Boulder visiting
Yes.
friends on your way back to Los Angeles.
Yes.
We're going to have to wrap this up. So tell me why. What is it?
Why LA? Yeah, I mean, there's no like one specific thing, like I got this job and I'm doing this. But in my time in Chicago, especially with Liliana, my sketch partner, we've been working on a lot of stuff and we've opened doors with some production companies and networks and people, so that by no means are we hitting it big or making it.
But you're going to try to exploit. It's not the right word. There's a saying.
I'm comfortable
about,
with exploit.
or you want to go to a bigger stage.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
I think right. I was ready to leave the comedy network. I felt like I had kind of done my duties, and it feels like the time to move on from the medium stage to attempt the big stage.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I think, right, we got to this point where we would like write a new thing or make a new sketch and send it out to people in New York, but mostly LA. And it got to the point where it's like, well, we should she's not moving out quite yet, but she's from there, so she's going to. But it just feels time to be out there and be like, hey, I made this thing. You want to get lunch?
Mm-hmm.
Which makes more sense for us.
And what would be the ideal outcome?
We would love to sell a TV show.
Okay.
I think, in the more immediate sense, I think we would love to write for TV. Yeah.
Jeremy, you're a smart man.
Okay. We've talked twice, but okay.
No, I say this because I think, and I've said this before, I think a comedy writing job
Yeah.
in Los Angeles is one of the best jobs in entertainment.
Yeah. Why do you think so?
I'll tell you why. So I think the money's pretty good.
Sure.
The hours are long, but the work is regular.
Right.
And it's real creative work.
Yes.
You laugh a lot. I mean, it's hard, but everything worth doing is.
Sure.
But you're surrounded by these smart, creative, funny people. You're creating smart, hopefully smart, at least funny content.
Right.
You're getting a regular paycheck. You're kind of under the radar.
I
So
know.
you can
the
live a
idea
normal life.
Right. The idea of being famous sounds really terrifying to me. Right. If I could be one of those like moles in a sweatshirt, just like writing the words, then yeah, that'd be super cool.
Yeah, I think it's a good. I think especially within comedy. I mean, there may be better jobs in entertainment, but as far as jobs in comedy, I think it's like really, it can be a good life if you can pull it off, if you can do it.
That's great.
That
was the last affirmation I needed. I'm going to go do it.
Well, that's great. I hope it works out for you, and I'm sure I'll see you when I'm in LA again. Yeah. Final question.
Sure.
What are you reading, watching, or listening to that really stands out?
Man.
I mean, not run-of-the-mill good, but just you're like, oh, wow.
Like really good.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I just got back into Better Call Saul.
Okay.
That's what I'm currently like binging right now. And for some reason, I think people like Breaking Bad is renowned for being like one of the best shows that was ever on television. And people aren't really watching Better Call Saul that much. Like it certainly fell out of my brain for a long time, and I got back into it, and it has a slow start, but when it gets into it, you realize, this is back to my weird affinity towards like legal stuff, but it's a really, really well done legal drama that feels like it has the same stakes. It's like I get the same adrenaline rush from Better Call Saul than I did from Breaking Bad.
Interesting. I've not watched it. Is it comedic at all?
A little bit. A little bit. I mean, Breaking Bad was also comedic a little bit, but
Yes.
this is much less gory for sure. And it's a little more like wonky. There's a lot of courtroom drama.
As evidence for how difficult it is to be famous, I remember like seeing the guy, what's his name?
Bob Odenkirk?
Yeah. At Griffith Park walking his dog.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yeah, like that's just, you just can't go out and walk
What a
your
weird
dog
thing, right?
In the same. I didn't say anything to him, but
Sure.
you're
Were
just
people
like,
saying things to him?
I think someone told me he was up there.
Right, that's it. It's like he's a smart enough dude to know that like I'm walking my dog in Griffith Park, and even if nobody talks to me, I am watched right now. What a terrifying Truman Show life to live.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It could be worse.
Yeah.
Anything else besides Better Call? So that's what you're watching? Anything
That's
you're
what I'm
reading
watching.
or listening to?
Let's do. I just
You're like, well, Key or Peel, one of those guys has this great podcast.
no, I'll never tell you the name of it. Never find it. I just started the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin, which is this like sci-fi book, and it's a trilogy. I literally just started it, but it came recommended from a couple friends, and so far it's like already fascinating.
Okay.
It's about, there's like this 5th season that happens, and it's like uninhabitable Earth, and it's written by this.
And you have to like hibernate during it or something like that?
You just like you have to figure out modes to survive.
Okay.
From what I understand so far.
I see.
I'm like 10 pages in.
Oh, I see.
But the reason I'm
I can't put it down.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. The reason I would pre-recommend it is because the story behind it is fascinating. That N.K. Jemisin
Sounds like a movie.
I think
There has to be a movie coming.
it must soon. But the
name, the 5th season, it's like
Yes.
written to be a movie.
It must be, but I don't think that was the intention, because the author, she's this black woman, and she is an amazing writer, but she had a really hard time publishing this book, and so she kickstarted it and wrote 3 of them on that funding, and they are all bestsellers now.
Oh, that's nice.
So yeah, I recommend it.
Oh, cool.
The first 10 pages are great.
Well, and coming to a theater near you in about 3 years.
About 3 years, yeah.
Yes. Jeremy, thank you for taking some time out of your little vacation, your trip to meet with me.
Thank you for meeting with me. I love talking this boring nerd bullshit.
Great. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week